The factoring of the sum of perfect squares is very similar to factoring the difference of perfect squares. So let's review the difference of perfect squares to begin with. Remember, the difference of squares, we would give you x squared minus 121 and ask you to factor it. And this would factor to the quantities of x minus 11 and x plus 11. Now if we look at the sum of these same two squares and ask you to factor them, so if I give you x squared plus 121, many would say, well, this is going to factor to x plus 11 and x plus 11. But if we were to check our work and multiply the x through, we would end up with x squared plus 11x, multiplying the 11 through, so plus 11x plus 121. Simplifying, we would see x squared plus 22x plus 121. Notice we don't end up with what we started with. So this is actually an incorrect factorization. In order to factor the sum of squares, and we're still going to use that x squared plus 121, we're going to use the complex number system, or the imaginary numbers. We're going to factor it very similar to what we did with the difference of squares. We're going to have x minus 11i and x plus 11i. You may be asking, why do we need that I in there? Well, let's go ahead and multiply this out and see how that I works out. If we multiply x through, we end up with x squared plus 11ix. Multiplying the negative 11i through, we get a negative 11ix and negative 121i squared. Our middle terms are going to cancel, so we end up with x squared. Remembering, at this negative 121i squared, the I squared becomes negative 1, so we have negative 121 times negative 1, or plus 121. So we see that we get what we started with, only if we use the complex number system. Let's look at another example, example 2, a little more complex. Let's start with 4x squared plus 225. The only reason this is a little more complex is because our numbers are a little larger and we have a leading coefficient with our x squared. But we're going to work this the same way. The square root of 4x squared is 2x, and the square root of 225 is 15. So we're going to end up with a 2x and a 15 in each one. We have the positive, so that's going to give us an I on both of our numbers, 15. And we're going to have a 1 positive and 1 negative. And there's your factorization. And for good measure, let's do one more. Let's do 121 x squared, well, let's get crazy, y squared, plus 36. So again, we're going to have our two binomials. We're going to take 121, the square root is 11. Square root of x squared, y squared is x and y. So we have 11xy in our second quantity. We have a plus 36, so we're going to have a plus 6 and a minus 6. And in order to get that positive in the end, we're going to have an I and an I. And there's the sum of perfect squares, factoring.